and welcome back to CEMA's podcast. Y'all ready for this? Where we talk about all things emergency preparedness to make sure that you and your family are ready for any type of natural or man-made disaster right here in Chatham County. This week, my co-host is none other than Sakile Johnson, our pet enthusiast, likes to talk about flooding, all things emergency preparedness. Sakile, thank you for being my co-host today.
Thank you for having me on again.
Well, and I had to introduce Sakile first because Sakile, I would like you to introduce our guest today because this is 100% your idea. So will you introduce our guest today?
Okay. Well, everyone, I am very excited to welcome to CEMA's podcast, Dr. Jake Harper of Chatham County Animal Services. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Harper.
Thank you very much for having me. This is going to be fun.
So we sat in our preparedness meeting for National Preparedness Month. Yes, I just said preparedness twice in the same sentence. And Sakile is like, Chelsea, we have to do pet preparedness. We have to. And I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's make it happen. And she's like, and I want to interview Dr. Harper. We have to do it. So here we are. This is Sakile's mind just exploding onto your screen and onto your headphones. She's excited to be a part of it today, I'm sure. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in with pet preparedness. Dr. Harper, what do you recommend for an animal that is really anxious about traveling in a car? You got to think about evacuations and the time frame that we're in. What would you do about that?
So, typically, if you have a dog that's anxious, you're going to know this. Like you take your dog to the vet, you take your dog in the car, I have a dog that is severely anxious in the car. There are a lot of different things you can do. One, the most important thing is talk to your veterinarian first. Your veterinarian may be able to give you specific things that you can try, there are drugs out there that you can use, prescription over the counter that you can use. I know, just like simple things that you can do is, dogs pick up on your stress too. This is going to be a really stressful time. So trying to be as calm as possible, keep it as normal as possible, have a safe place for the dog in the car. That's a big, or a cat for that matter. Have a safe place. If you're looking for, in an emergency situation, like you didn't do this, your dog becomes anxious, you've never seen it before, the dog or cat all of a sudden becomes anxious. Things that you can use that you may have on hand. Benadryl is a wonder drug sometimes for these things. I usually tell people to try Benadryl out first before they use it on their, use it in an emergency type situation, because sometimes with people, they can become, it has an adverse effect where you get excited. It very rarely happens in dogs, but typically you can, use something over the counter like Benadryl. There are some other more non-prescription type drugs. One of them, you can go to Whole Foods or some of those places where they have like supplements, and they have there's a rescue remedy. That's just a supplement that has chamomile in it, something like that you can use that are safe for dogs. And that's the most important thing is you want to use something that you want to try to keep the dog as calm as possible. You can use something safe. So consult with your veterinarian, talk to them to see if you need something more, more involved than just something like, Benadryl or something calming. There are tons of things out there that you can try. And the other part of it is a lot of times, having dogs loose in the car may increase their anxiety. Dogs like to be in small spaces. So if you have a dog that's small enough and you have a vehicle that's big enough that you can use a carrier for the dog, that's ideal. Cats should be in a carrier no matter what, just because cats are cats. But I think with dogs, some people, you have the typical picture of the dog sticking their head out the window when people are driving down the road. Try to keep them as safe as possible. The biggest concern that we have when we're doing this is you don't know how long you're going to be in the car. People are evacuating, there's traffic, there's all kinds of things. So that's where you really need to start thinking these things through. Like what, you may have a dog that you take them to the vet or you take them to the park and they're totally fine in the car. But if you keep them cooped up for a long period of time, that anxiety may increase. So the biggest thing is, like we're talking about, be prepared, plan ahead, know what you're dealing with.
That is a really good point. I have a very anxious cat that does not like getting in the car. He screams about it. So he must be bribed to get into any vehicle at any point in time. And I kind of added this question in selfishly for myself, but do you have any tips for getting pets into carriers or crates, especially ones like maybe really doesn't enjoy being in such things.
So one of the things to use is use the crate at times other than going somewhere. Like if you have a cat like yours that doesn't like to go into a crate, leave the crate out in the house. Leave it out there, let it sit around, maybe put food in it, put treats in it so that they go in and out of it. So it's not something like, cats in particular are very kind of, they're very in tune with what's going on and what environmental changes. And, if you have a cat that doesn't like the carrier, the only time you ever get the carrier out is to take the cat to the vet or to evacuate or whatever, then that's going to already automatically signal them and say, hey, whoa, what the heck is going on? So having a carrier out there, leave it out just leave it out, let them kind of play in it, use toys, like if they like to chase, like laser lights or, toys, throw the treat, throw them into the carrier, get them to go into the carrier without being trapped in the carrier. The other thing that works really well with cats in particular is there is a drug, or it's a spray called Feel Away. It's Feel Away spray. And what it is, it's a derivative of the pheromones from the cat, good pheromones from a cat, and it can calm cats. It comes in kind of a Glade plug-in type thing that you can use like for environment stuff, but it also there's also a spray. So you can use this spray, sometimes just using that spray it on a towel, leave it in the carrier, it kind of gets rid of that bad juju that may be in that carrier, and it can help the cat get in there.
This is changing my life right now.
Right. If you have a cat, and like most people, it depends on the carrier too. Like I like the carriers that just have one front door to them are really hard to get cats into. They put all fours out and they kind of hold around. So if you can get one of the carriers that have a front load and a top load, the little cage on the top that you can open. That's also a little bit beneficial to the cat because it's a little bit more open. You have more options to try to get the cat into the carrier. We've all done the thing where we turn you have the carrier with the front door and you have to turn it on its side, hold the cat up and drop the cat. My arms look huge. Put the cat down in the carrier. We've done that. So, I think the biggest thing is just try, once again, preparedness. Think about things that you're going to have to do if you have to get the cat in, make the carrier not a bad place.
Awesome.
I can literally see Sakile going to Amazon right after we get off of this. And be
Right.
like, what is this? I need it.
It's amazing. That stuff is amazing. Like it really, I used to, when we have cats with litter box issues and things like that, you'd use these pheromone sprays because it looks like it's a little, just an insert you put in the wall, like those Glade things. But it comes in a spray form. You can get it everywhere. Feel Away. It's perfect.
Wow.
All right. You've wrecked Sakile's world and it's only been a couple of minutes. I like it. All right. So let's talk about, sometimes pet owners, they don't think about it and they may decide to just leave their pets at home, especially when they're evacuating. What kind of words of wisdom do you have for someone that may be considering that?
Don't do it. I mean, I think that the biggest, I guess, because it's an unknown. You don't know. You don't know how long you're going to be gone. You don't know what's going to happen when you're gone. You have no idea. We hear stories all the time of people like, okay, I'm going to leave my cat here. I'm just going to put food out and, just put a bag of food out. Cats, cats are pretty self-sufficient. So you may think, oh yeah, I can leave my cat. It's no big deal. You don't know. And I think that's the biggest thing. We may come in, if there's no other thing that you can do, I think you just need to be prepared. I think I wouldn't recommend leaving them at home, leaving them behind at all. It's the unknown factor. Like, you evacuate, you don't know when you're coming back. It could be pretty traumatic for the animal. It could put them in pretty dangerous situations. And, honestly, leaving a pet at home is almost, it would be borderline abandonment. So I don't recommend it. I don't really have any other words of wisdom other than don't do it.
Don't do it. Hey, those are some great words of wisdom. Don't do it.
Pretty solid advice. So on the note of preparedness, do you have any tips for pet owners who need to start building out their pets' emergency kits?
Yeah, I think it's all kind of the common things that you would think of that you would need for a kid, to be honest. You need to have food. You need to have something for them to eat the food out of. You need to have water, something for them to drink the water out of. When you start, a leash, a collar, vet records. That's one of the big things that sometimes people don't think about is like, hey, you may have a rabies tag, but you may not use it, you may not keep it on your dog's collar. You need to have that record, because if you're, depending on where you go, you may need to have documentation that the dog's vaccinated for rabies or the cat's vaccinated for rabies. So you need to make sure you have that. A carrier, a bed, or something to use as a bed. That, it's things, they make really cool, like collapsible bowls that you can use. Those are the big things. I'm trying to think of anything else that, anything specific. Medications, I think, you always should have, the basic first aid stuff. Most of the first aid stuff that you can use for people, you can use for a dog or cat. Don't typically use a lot of that, like some of the drugs, but like just bandage material, those kind of things, just in case. Let's say you're on the road and you have to pull over to go, let the dog out to go to the restroom, and it's a rocky area. The dog steps on a rock, cuts its foot, hurts its foot, has a laceration on its foot. You need to put something on there. You need to be able to bandage it up to get somewhere. So, it's typically kind of the same stuff that you would have, just adding in leashes and collars and those kind of things. Feel away spray.
There you go. Sakile's still going to Amazon after this.
I know, right?
All right. So what about people that maybe some tips or tricks for people that aren't necessarily dog or cat owners? Maybe people that have a fish. I'd like to see you try to put a leash on a fish. Maybe a snake or something like that. What do you think?
Well, I think those are even more important to have have a plan in place to be prepared. People may think, oh, well, you have a fish, you have a snake that doesn't eat very often. And if I'm only going to evacuate for 2 or 3 days, I can just leave that snake here, no big deal. All these, the animals that we're talking about, like birds and snakes and fish and those things, depend on electricity. One, like you have to, if they're if you have an aquarium, or if you have a terrarium where you have some sort of reptile, then they have to stay warm. So you can't depend on the power to stay on here. So you can't leave those guys by home. So I think that most people that have those animals should have some sort of portable. You should have some kind of travel case with them. Something that to transport these guys with when you go. Like it's the same situation. Don't leave them behind. It may make it difficult, but I know that there are a lot of people that may make a choice not to evacuate when they have these animals, and that's not always the best thing either. So I think having a plan, having something, having everything in place that where you can take it and know where you can go with these certain animals. There's not a lot of places. If you can kind of you may be able to sneak a snake into a hotel room, but you should probably plan it. Need to plan ahead and know where you can go and what you need to do.
Yikes. I don't want to be on the receiving end of someone sneaking a snake into a hotel room. Like, what if it got out?
Absolutely not.
Mm-mm.
Can you talk a little bit about microchipping? Like, is it safe? Is it expensive? What kind of pets is it recommended for?
Oh, wow. This is one of my favorite topics. So microchips. A microchip is a very small grain of rice type. It's a electronic device. The way it works is it doesn't send out a signal, but it can receive a signal. So like if you have they're basically a sensor that you can scan and get a number off of. A lot of people think about microchips being like a GPS. It's not a GPS. It doesn't track you. It doesn't do anything else. It just simply is a form of identification. It's imperative that every dog and cat have these things, because not only in times of evacuation or in times of stress or any, national, emergency type stuff, these microchips can be lifesavers. That, they can identify your pet. Let's imagine your dog runs out, doesn't have its collar on, the microchip stays there. Let's go back to the beginning and talk about what the microchip, how you do this. So the microchip, very small grain of rice, is in a needle, and it's injected under the skin of a dog or cat, usually behind, right between the shoulder blades. It's an injection. It's safe. I mean, occasionally if you have a fractious animal that's kind of moving around when you give them when you do that, you can sometimes cause that, they get stressed. It hurts for a second. It's like a vaccine. It's like an injection. But that microchip embeds underneath the skin and stays there. And it doesn't usually go anywhere. Typically, I would say 99% of the time, quote me on the exact stats, but 99% of the time it's completely safe and innocuous. But, occasionally you can get infections from these things just based on because it is a foreign body that you're putting under the skin, but that happens very rarely. It's a quick procedure. Usually you can do it like it's a walk in. We do some vaccine, we do it in some vaccine clinics here where people will come in. It takes 5 minutes to register and do the injection and send them on their way. Typically, cost-wise, it depends. Like if you go to, there's fee, the fee is involved includes the actual application of the actual installment of the microchip and the registration. What happens when you register these things is, like I said, the microchip has a number that's unique to each microchip. That number is in a database for whichever microchip company that you use, and that is registered to you as the owner. Your information, your address, all your contact information, and different microchip companies have different like levels, I guess you could say. Like the microchip in and of itself will identify your dog no matter what, and will go back to a database. But there are, depending on what you want to pay for, you can pay for a additional membership where if your dog is lost, you can call the microchip company. They will pull all your information for the dog or the cat and basically send out emails to local veterinarians and things like places in there, humane societies and things that can actually put out almost like an APB for your animal. And they do more active searching. There's always the passive searching, which is the microchip being present itself that we scan. Like when we get animals that come into animal services, every dog and cat that comes in here is scanned for a microchip, and we return a lot of, probably, I would say 5-10% of the dogs that we get in that have microchips, we can get them back to their house. Cost wise, like I said, it depends. I mean, we charge $20 for our microchips. For everything, and that just includes basically the passive registration. But the microchip company, once you register, they usually contact you and say, hey, would you like this extra service? Would you like that? These different things. One of the most important things you can do, and I can speak from personal experience, is when you move, that's one of the things that need to be on your list to say, hey, I need to change my contact information for my animal, because otherwise, how are they going to get in touch with me? When we first moved to Savannah, we had a Chihuahua that had a microchip, and he liked to just move and roam and do stuff. And he ran off, and they scanned the microchip, and they were, we didn't find it. We found him 2 days later, actually, from neighbors and things. But they said they'd been calling the microchip, but they'd been calling a place that they'd been calling an old cell phone number that had been, disconnected, because we didn't think about that kind of stuff. So that's just one of the other things on your checklist of preparedness, like when you move, to get the microchips. And I think microchips are a big deal. And I think, like when you look back to all the, when you do have, natural disasters or hurricanes or whatever, evacuations, and you have a lot, for whatever reason, there are just tons of stray dogs. You don't know, like the first thing people do is scan them and they can find them. I think the other big deal with this is we're traveling on the road in evacuations. Who's to say your dog's not going to jump out you stop at a gas station, he runs away. You're in Macon, you go from Savannah to Macon, your dog runs away. What are you going to do? Well, it's microchipped and it'll call you. If your cell phone's registered, they can call you. So I think that's a big deal, because you're taking animals into foreign environments and things they're not used to. And the best protection is to have some sort of ID on them, and microchip is the best.
So I'll give a shout out to Dr. Harper. We planned a vaccination and microchip clinic with CEMA and Chatham County Animal Services a couple of years ago. And I brought in my dog Kylie. I brought her in and I said, we're going to get her microchip today. And Dr. Harper's like, oh, like we'll fake do it on Facebook Live. And then he kind of looks at me in the middle of Facebook Live and he goes, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and do this. And he just straight microchipped my animal. And it was just like that. So when he says it's a quick process, he was not kidding. It was very, very quick. And she did not have any issues whatsoever. And he did it live on Facebook. So listeners, if you want to see it happen, you're welcome to go look on that. It was pretty cool. But also I just moved, and as Dr. Harper was talking, I was like writing myself a sticky note.
You wrote yourself a sticky note.
I need to change the address in my dog's microchip. So perfect. Thank you, Dr. Harper. That was beautiful. All right.
I'm still thinking about that roaming Chihuahua. You just have a Chihuahua that just was bold enough to just run around.
We had a lab with him. We had a Chihuahua and a black lab, and the Chihuahua would get out of the gate, and the lab followed him. So
he had a bodyguard.
He was kind of the ringleader, and he ended up I think he walked into a lady's garage, and they were just hanging out. Aww. His name was Manny Ramirez. I'm a Red Sox fan, so.
Oh my gosh.
This was back in the day.
Wow.
The one thing I will say about microchips too is, the registration part is really, really, really important, because we get a lot of dogs that are microchipped, and we get dead end microchips where we can go in and we can't find it. And it's really sad when you have these dogs, they're owned, and that somebody's taking care to microchip their dog, but yeah, they didn't register. And when you scan them, it's a really quick process. There's a couple websites, like AKC Reunite is one of the websites that we use, where you basically just can go online, type in the microchip number, and it'll tell you the microchip company. You call them. And I just was on the phone yesterday with one of the microchip companies that we use, and they're looking to try to basically coordinate with other microchip companies to get one database, so that you go to one place, the microchip, and you can find it. Because sometimes the only information that we get is, this microchip was implanted at, Broward County Animal Services in Florida, and you don't know, you can't trace it any further than that. But that gives you enough, because you can call them and say, hey, what's the microchip number? And they can tell you, this dog was adopted to so-and-so in 2015, and we can kind of track it that way. But a lot of people are reunited with their pets just because of the microchip, so it's a real good thing.
That's awesome. So let's say we have a worst case scenario. We have an animal that's not microchipped, and they get lost during a disaster. What's kind of the first step? What do you do if you haven't taken that step to microchip your animal?
I think it depends on where you are. If you're, where the first thing you should do is call your local animal services, local animal control place where you are. I think that's kind of the first thing to do, because that's kind of the first contact. I think we're typically the first contact with any of those things. Most places have we have an online submission here where you can submit a lost dog report. That will be the first step. I think the other thing, I think that's the big thing, searching the areas. Typically, if you're looking at, if dogs get lost because of, you're traveling and you're in a hotel and they run away, they don't typically go far. So I think, talking to the people at the hotel, talking to people around the area, hey, getting the word out locally is a big deal, because that's going to help you be able to better find them. Unfortunately, if it's not microchipped and the dog, you're in a strange area, the dog doesn't have a collar, cat doesn't have a collar, that's the unfortunate thing, is those dogs may not be found. That's why the microchip is so important, because it's so easy to use that it's kind of a no-brainer. If you've got, that's part of being prepared. If you can get your pet microchip, it makes it so much easier to be able to know that it's going to be able to get back to you if you lose it.
And then update the address when you move.
And update the address. The big thing nowadays is just to make sure the phone number is correct. No one everyone keeps the same cell phone number forever. I mean, I've got my cell phone number still has an area code from Atlanta. So, so we always keep those same cell phones, but for whatever reason, I think when we moved, it was I had a different cell phone number from Atlanta. So anyway, it's very possible we may not even registered the dog when we did the microchip, to be honest. But it's easy to do. If you forget, that's the other beautiful thing about a microchip is if you forget and your dog's in a microchip and you lose the information, you can't remember where you did it or what happened. All you have to do is bring it here or take it somewhere where they have a microchip scanner. They can scan it, get the number for you. You can go on their database, find out which company it was from, call them and re-register. So it's a pretty simple procedure.
Thanks.
Awesome. So on that note, what are some common problems other than not microchipping pets that you observe when people are trying to get their pet prepared? You know, what should happen to get pets prepared versus what actually does happen?
I think one of the big things is not having vaccine records. I think if you don't have, or not being vaccinated, that's the other part of this. It's like if you're, we're getting into, evacuation season, possibly, or hurricane season or whatever, or any time of the year, to be honest, and your dog doesn't have a current rabies vaccine and you don't get on that real quick to get it done, it's really hard. If you're getting to, you're going to take, you're evacuating, you're going to take your dog somewhere else and you may have to board it somewhere. You may have to do it somewhere else where you get there. If you don't have the vaccine records, that's going to be really hard to get it. You're not going to be able to board it. They won't let the dog board without rabies and proof of other vaccines. And just having that, not having it done, then you have to rush to try to get it done. You're in an emergency situation where where are you actually going to be able to do that? So keeping pet records up to date is one. Keeping pet records with you is the other one, because if you don't have, proof that your dog has a rabies vaccine, then your dog doesn't have a rabies vaccine. So that's really important. I think the other part of it is with the travel, having a place for them to be in a car. I have experience with, different people when we've had evacuations here where people would come to the evacuation center and they're like, well, I've got my dogs, but they can't ride in the car with me. What do I do? And, I think it was a couple of years ago when a couple of evacuations where we took the dog with us. We didn't take it with us. We transported it for them up there because we were transporting up to Augusta. But not having a place for the dog to ride is a big thing. Forgetting that, you have 2 kids or maybe 3 kids and 2 dogs. Where are you going to where's all this going to go in the car? How are you going to get it to a place? I think that's another, common problem. The other thing comes up with, with cats in particular. I think some people have indoor outdoor cats that have never been in a carrier, never been to a vet. That's a problem. You don't want to leave those guys to fend for themselves, but they're not in any way, shape, or form prepared to go into a carrier and go somewhere. So I think that's a big thing. Is just, over the, throughout the year, make sure you have vaccine records, medication. That's another big thing is medications. Your dog's on a chronic medication. Let's say your dog is epileptic and it has seizures, and you haven't refilled you're toward the end of your medication refill. You need a refill. Make sure those medications are refilled, or make sure you don't forget them when you leave, because it's very difficult to go from Savannah to somewhere else and you need a controlled substance like phenobarbital that your dog needs for seizures, and you can't find somewhere to refill it. So that could put your dog in danger for that. So I think that's another big thing, just to have, like I said, you have a checklist, like with everything. These are the things that we need to leave. Like if you're on some sort of medication, chronic medication, you're going to take that with you. So you need to make sure you take your dogs and cats with you too, if you need it.
Wow, that is a lot of amazing information and a good way to kind of recap and finish up. You talked about, medications and making sure that you have a way to transport your animals, making sure that you get that really awesome spray that helps your cat feel a little bit more comfortable. I feel like I've personally taken a lot away from this podcast, and that was a lot of fun. Is there anything else that you forgot or that you left out that you think would be important to mention as we wrap up, Dr. Harper?
I think the one thing that, when we go back to medications, I want to, like we talk about different, first aid kit type stuff. I will say that we have a lot of times, you're traveling with your dog hurts himself, and you say, I can't call my vet. I need to give him some medication. What can I give him? I think, the biggest things, I get a call a lot about, what kind of pain meds can I give my dog? There's really nothing out there other than contacting the veterinarian, to be honest. I mean, you can't, people, I'll just give them a Tylenol. Well, dogs don't do well with Tylenol. Cats cannot take Tylenol at all. So a lot of the over-the-counter stuff that people would take, you need to avoid with your animals. So that's even in emergency situations. So I think that's, that's one of the big takeaways is, when you're preparing your first aid kit or your bug out kit for your dog, make sure that you have dog specific stuff there that you use, aside from Benadryl, which is pretty safe to use, but it's some of the other things you need to be careful with. And microchip your animal. That's all I can say. So if you're microchips are wonderful.
Yeah, so microchips, and don't give your cat Tylenol. I had no idea that was a thing. So again, I'm learning even more. Dr. Harper, always a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for being here today. Sakile, I know you're just like grinning. Do you have anything else to say?
I'm just so thankful that you were able to join us. Thank you for sharing this wealth of information. And yes, microchip your pets, especially if you have a cat like mine that just seems to get out of every collar we have ever on him.
Cats are more important than dogs. I think cats should be microchipped. I think cats are the ones that are gonna squirt away from you when you're on the road. Cats are the ones that don't like to ride in the car. Cats are the ones that are like, hey, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be in the car with all these kids. They're the antisocial ones that they might want to be left behind. To be honest, they might want to say, you know what, this will give me some peace and quiet, so I can just hang out and chill at the house. But don't do it. Microchip them and take them with you, and then hopefully, if they get loose, you'll be reunited. They'll have a story to tell their friends.
There you go. They can just be ornery on their own time later on, but they'll be safe, and that's the important part.
Right.
All right. Well, always thank you so much. Always a wealth of information. Dr. Harper, you are awesome. Listeners, be sure to tune in next week as we completely shift gears off of National Preparedness Month and start talking about our Emergency Operations Center again. And we are going to hear from the Chatham County Public Information Office team, and we are going to be talking about what it takes to set up a Joint Information Center. Now, I've realized I just said a lot of acronyms. We'll break down what all of those are, what they mean, and how you might even be able to get engaged and involved during a disaster. Until then, bye guys.
Bye guys.